We need to tax each family $40,000. Things would have happened to those politicians I don't even want to discuss. And in case you're imagining it doesn't happen, it is happening right now to another country. So I'll tell you about that. It's a little country. Got 305,000 people, the whole country. It has a name that'll give it away. It's called Iceland. See, Iceland got into trouble when its banks behaved badly. But the problem was, when its banks behaved badly, it behaved badly with their foreign branches. Icelandic banks, it's a long story, set up branches in Holland and in England. So when the crisis hit, the bank told its depositors, Dutch people and British people, we're very sorry, the money you gave us is all gone, have a nice day. And the people got upset. And they ran at the bank and threw objects through the window. This frightened the Dutch and the British governments. So what they did was the same thing the United States did. They simply announced one day, we, the government of Britain, we, the government of Holland, we will simply make good, so don't worry about your money. If the bank folds, the government will take care of you. They didn't do that to help the people. They did that because they understood that if they didn't do that, every other British citizen would wake up and say, if this is happening to an Icelandic bank, it's probably going to happen to my own bank, and everybody would have run, and the economy would have collapsed. So now the British and the Dutch governments, they want the Icelandic to make good all the money they spent to bail out these people. So they went to the Icelandic government and said, you owe us X billion dollars. So the Icelandic government, it's very cute, a few months ago went to its people and said, well, we have to make good according to the British and the Dutch, and that means we're going to have to raise the money to do that, and that'll cost you ready? $85,000 per family of each of you here in Iceland. At which point the people of Iceland said to their leaders, well, they actually didn't say it, they raised a particular finger, I won't tell you which one. And then a referendum was held, and that referendum vote was, I believe, in February of this year, and the Icelandic people, who are a very diverse political population, small country, but they have about 20 political parties. See, they're not modern like we are. We have only 2. They have a lot of them, and it's very good. See, they only have one kind of toothpaste in the store, but they have 20 parties. Who wants that? We're more modern. We have 20 kinds of toothpaste, but only 1 or 2 parties you can't hardly come apart. In Iceland, it's a little different, so they had a referendum. They had a referendum, and in the referendum, the Icelandic people who have never agreed on anything voted, ready, 91%, we're not giving them that money. Interesting. Turns out you can fight back. Something you might want to think about. But here in the United States, the government did not choose taxation because it would have been run out of town on a rail. So what did the government do? Well, there's a second way the government can raise money. The government has the right to print the stuff. You know those green pieces of paper in your wallet? If you're lucky you have some. Those green pieces of paper are printed by the government. You're not allowed to do that. If you do that, they come and take you away. So the government could print the money, but that makes people wonder about the United States. And we have to be very careful as a nation about other people's attitude towards the dollar. Why? Because over the last 30 years, in addition to everything else I've told you, the United States, as we went on a borrowing binge, even when the big corporations lent money to the workers needed more. And when the government didn't want to raise taxes on rich people and corporations, the government had to borrow. And when we ran out of money here inside the United States, the government borrowed outside. The United States is now the #1 debtor country in the world. No country comes close. We owe more money than any country on earth. A lot more. And in case you didn't know what this means, it produces some very strange global economics. The largest creditor of the United States, the country that has lent the most money to us, is the People's Republic of China. Okay? The largest creditor of the capitalist United States is the communist government of China. Hello? We owe them about $1.3 trillion. If you calculate roughly 4 or 5% is the interest we owe, that means we have to ship them $60 or $70 billion a year in interest. So we are sending to China every year much more money than it would take to completely wipe out the entire deficit of the state of California 2 or 3 times over. And so on behalf of the people of China, I once again wish to say thank you. You are very kind, you folks here, to help the Chinese society develop by sending them all that money while you claim you can't manage your own economic affairs. So the United States cannot fool around with money, can't print money, because the Chinese and the Japanese, that's the second biggest lender to the United States, Japan, they would be very nervous about holding all these debts in dollars. They would get rid of them, and then our economy would really be finished. So we can't afford to alienate them. We have to be very nice to the Chinese and the Japanese, real nice. The way you are to somebody to whom you owe vast amounts of money. So the government had only one way left to raise the money to solve the economic crisis. It borrowed it. And who did it borrow it from? You guessed it. The People's Republic of China, who is now helping the United States bail out its banks. The communist government of China is helping the United States government bail out the defunct banks that run this society. Oh, you got that? You're living in that. That money has to be paid back. And it has to have interest paid on it all the time. And you and your children and all of ours will be paying that back for a long time. And all the states, with one exception in Oregon, are finding that they have to cope. They're not allowed to borrow the way the federal government is, so they're cutting back, which puts new demands on the federal government just at the time that it doesn't have the money. This is a situation that is grim and getting grimmer. What happened in Oregon is my next part, and then I'm going to tell you where else it can go. Thank you. In Oregon, the people reacted to all of this in a different way. Last summer, Oregon, which has a Democratic governor, Democratic both houses of the legislature, had a bill introduced which said, and you should be interested in this because the bill says the following: we in Oregon don't want to do what the people in California are doing. We don't want to cut services. We don't want to fire teachers. We don't want to lay off social workers. None of that. So we're not going to. We have a big budget deficit for all the reasons everybody does, but we're not going to handle it that way. Here's what we're going to do. And I want to remind you, this is Oregon, you know, north. Not Russia, China, Cuba, or anything else. Oregon. They said, we're going to solve the problem as follows. We're going to keep all of our people working, and we're going to solve the deficit, the shortage of taxes, by finally making people pay who haven't been paying anywhere near enough. And we mean in particular corporations and rich people. So Oregon passed a law, and the governor signed it. Nobody will get laid off. They will raise taxes on business. All families earning $250,000 or more, so some of you can now relax, will have to pay higher taxes. And people earning $500,000 or more will pay even higher taxes. And the two legislatures passed it, and the governor signed it. The conservative Republicans and the business community went ballistic. And they used the right, which they have in Oregon, to demand a public referendum as to whether the people would support what the legislature had done. And last February, 2 months ago, 1.2 million Oregonians went to the polls on a Tuesday and voted in favor of the law. And if you didn't know anything about this, let that be a lesson to you in what the media do and do not tell you about. 800 stories about teabaggers, but nothing about this.
Exactly right.
That's the law in Oregon. No cuts. Rich people and corporations have to pay. By the way, in case you weren't You're upset for the corporation. Let me tell you what the corporation tax was. This was called a minimum tax on corporation. It was passed in 1931. In 1931, the Oregon legislature, 1931, last depression, passed a tax on corporations because before that there was no minimum tax. They passed a minimum tax over the opposition of the business community, and they set it at the stunning level of $10